First of all, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me for this August gathering. Today, as it has already been announced, I will be talking about migration and urbanization, and my reference point will be Nepal. So, I was talking to one of the organizers about the medium of speech. So, when I was told that it's okay in Nepali or in English. So, probably because the slides are in English, I will be talking in Nepali as well. Let me begin. Let me begin by what I'm going to talk about, basically things. As the topic suggests, it is migration and urbanization. I will begin with some of the conceptual aspects of migration and urbanization, and that will be followed by the links between migration and urbanization. And towards the end, if the time permits, I will be talking about migration and urbanization situation in Nepal. Now, I know all of you are familiar with the terminology migration, and I am sure you are also familiar with urbanization. Initially, I thought I should talk about conceptual aspects a little in detail, but then later I thought, because the time I have is only 30 minutes, and so if I enter into these conceptual aspects, I thought it will take more time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to skip some of my slides on conceptual aspects. In case from the floor, if that question is there, I'll be very happy to answer that that time. So what this slide basically talks about is only one thing. That is, at the face value, the concept migration appears to be as simple, very simple. And so is the concept of urbanization. But then as you enter into its details, into nitty-gritty of what constitutes migration and what constitutes urbanization, the more you enter into it, the more complex it gets. And definitely, I must mention to you, before is that there is no universally accepted definition of migration, nor is the universally accepted definition of urbanization. Now, this slide primarily intends to give some complexities of defining migration. I don't want to go into detail of this, but what basically this slide intends to show is that when we talk about migration, there are 4 dimensions we must think of. The first dimension is space, because migration involves movement from one place to another, and somebody has to define what this place means. And then defining that involves what constitutes an area, and then someone has to cover some distances due to moving from one place to another. So for that reason, it involves area and the distance. And distances, you can define distances several ways. It's a geographical distance, it's a psychological distance, it's economic distance, so the complexity goes on and on. The second dimension is time. How long a migrant should move to be considered as migrant? 1 day, 2 days, 1 month, a year, throughout the year, or the whole life? So that also is, is a complex phenomenon. And again, there is no universally accepted definition. Now, the third one is residence. It's change in residence from one place to another. And the last one is, activity. In some cases, the mover may change his activity. In other cases, it may not. But let me point out one thing. That is, before I enter into this slide, what I wanted to say is that the analysis of migration in the case of Nepal, whatever data you will be getting is based on census definition. And that census definition is a person who is away from home for more than 6 months is considered as absent from the household. And that absentee number is considered by scholars as migrant. So that's basically it. Okay. Now, the concept of urbanization. I'm a student of geography. So, what we do is we categorize species into 2 categories, rural and urban. And what happens is there's a common sense is that there are 2 ways to define what is urban. One way is it's a process. It's a process, you will see that by which villages turn into towns and towns develop into cities. So that's what we call a process of urbanization. And then what is commonly understood is developing world is predominantly rural and developed world is predominantly urban. That's the common sense understanding, although we can always deviate on that. Let me point out some of the things in Nepal. What is our tendency is that there's a common sense. If I can speak in Nepali, I'm sure you are familiar with the terms gaunle and shaharia. Knowingly or unknowingly, we have a tendency that gaunle, look at here, rural. In many ways, rural translates into very simple. Simple translates into not modern. And then that translates into not civilized. That's one expression, gaunle. And you will notice that we have saying, look at that, pahade, pakhe, gaunle, kaathe. These are the terminologies we have heard people using it. And then what it means is, you look at urban. The way it happens is rural, simple, urban, complex, right? And then complex equals modern equals civilized. So, the common understanding, we can always debate on it, but still the common understanding is urban, the more urban, the more civilized. Rural, the tendency is, well, may not be civilized. That's a common sense. Now, the other way to define urban is what percentage of population in a given territory lives in defined urban areas. So that indicates percentage of urbanization. Basically, when we talk about urbanization, there are 3 components we need to consider. That is, okay. One is behavior, the other one is structure, and the third one is demography. What I mean by behavior is the way the people behave in urban areas are a little different than the people behaving in the rural area. So there is some difference. More formal in urban areas, less formal in rural areas. And that structure basically means the type of occupation people are engaged in. In rural areas, mostly the tendency is people are involved in agriculture or primary production. And in urban areas, it's the other way around. Occupation is much more on tertiary area. And then demography. Basically, what demography means is there's a concentration of population. We expect concentration of population. Okay, I don't want to go into detail with this. In this slide, I just wanted to show what are the criteria defining urban areas. So these are, you will notice that there is this minimum population size, and the municipalities or district, as they are regional headquarters, sometimes are referred as urban, and then status granted as urban by the government, and there are also some, if some forms of government are there, and in that case we have a tendency of giving, considering it urban, and also particular proportion of population engaged in non-agricultural activities, and countries differ in these definitions. If I have to tell you about what is the case of Nepal, there are several criteria to define urban areas, but lately the demographic criteria is such that if an area lies in mountain, to be considered as urban areas, that locality has to have a population of at least 10,000 or more. And if it is hill, it's 40,000 or more. If it is in inner Tarai, it's 50,000 or more. If it is in Tarai, 75,000 or more. If it is in Kathmandu Valley, it's 100,000 or more to be considered as urban. Now, how urbanization develops, or what are the components of urban growth? There are basically four components of urban growth: natural increase, migration, annexation, and reclassification. Natural increase, that means excess of birth over death. That's demography. And the second one is migration. Migration, there are two forms of migration. Internal migration, that is people moving from one locality to another locality within the same country. And the second one is international migration. People coming from other countries. The third one is annexation. Annexation meaning, what happens in this process is there is already defined urban areas, and very close to urban areas, other rural areas develop a characteristics of being urban. So in that case, in many cases, after some intervals, the government decides to include that area adjacent to already existing urban areas into part of urban. For example, this Kathmandu as we know today, the Kalimati areas, the Chavail areas were not part of Kathmandu metropolitan earlier. That was annexed early in 1981. So that happens to many areas. Today's scenario in Nepal is there are so many areas included within the existing urban areas, and also there are, the last one is reclassification. Government decides to reclassify rural areas into urban areas. So what has happened? In the case of Nepal, in 2011, we only had 58 municipalities, which we call urban areas. 58. By now, with all this state restructuring process, there was new commission for restructuration, and then it came out like we have now only 753 localities, these units, local units, and out of them 293 are urban, and then the rest rural. That's about it. Now, I just wanted to talk more on this. What is the nexus between migration and urbanization? I have a few 10, 11 points to mention. What the theory says, we have a number of theories in migration, and these migration theories refer to urbanization process as well. What they say is normally natural growth of population is low in urban areas and high in rural areas. So what that means is rural areas population growth is relatively high, and urban areas natural increase is relatively low. The second one is large towns grow more by migration than by natural increase. The third nexus between migration and urbanization is the major direction of migration is from agricultural areas to the centers of industry or commerce. The centers of industry and commerce are normally the urban areas. The other one, migrants going long distances generally go by preference to one of the great centers of commerce and industry. That's what migration theory says. When people have to move and they have choices, small cities and large cities, they definitely go to larger cities. The other one, migration increases in volume as industries and commerce develop and transport improves. I think we all understand that. The other one, the natives of towns are less migratory than those of rural areas. I don't know how this comes, but this is one of the established notions. The other nexus, the main causes of migration are economic. There are wage differentials between rural and urban areas. A wage worker living in rural areas or working in rural areas earns less than that of urban areas. The other point is migration to urban areas may be rational despite lack of immediate employment, since the expected gain in the planning horizon may exceed the immediate loss. Now there is a theory by one of the economists, and it says that people know in the rural areas that they may not get full employment as soon as they enter into cities, and they will be looking for employment. They know it, there is unemployment. Despite knowing that there is unemployment in urban areas, they tend to move. They tend to move because they have certain planning horizon. They think